All right, ladies and gentlemen, curious to see how a lot of you guys are doing today. We've brought up a couple people on the channel because it's been an interesting morning. Now I've heard Adam vent a little bit. I'm sure Peter's had quite a busy morning. So before we get real into the meat and potatoes here, let's just introduce our friends for today. So Peter, you joined on last. How you doing, my man?
Doing well given the circumstances. As you said, it's been a busy morning. Wish it was under different circumstances, but yeah, I guess we're gonna get into it pretty soon here.
Adam, I already kind of know how you're doing, but why don't you let our chat know how you're feeling today?
It was rough news to wake up to. I was excited for Canada to finally get an opportunity to play outside of the region. I had my own opinions about the friendly being with Iran in the first place, but we were past that point in my head, and it was happening, and so to have the rug pulled out from under us today kind of obviously sucks for a lot of the Canadian soccer community. But I'm sure we'll get into all that and a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot we got to break down, and I don't know how long our guests are going to stay for. So whenever they got to go, just be sure to let me know. But I mean, let's just start off with the initial reaction. Soccer Canada tweeted out this morning that they decided to cancel it. I won't try to too hard to get on the political side of the event, but let's just go to Peter first. What was your initial reaction when you saw that the friendly was canceled? Were you expecting this, or do you think that it was too far done so far that was a bit of a surprise to you?
I think so, the latter, based on what I was hearing, because literally the entire time I was speaking about, um, you know, it was a lot of conversation about, okay, here's what could happen if we cancel it. So as a result, I thought to myself, well, if they cancel it, if X, Y, and Z happens, this is going to be a major issue. And for that reason, I thought, I'm sure Canada Soccer can find a way to maneuver through this, get this friendly organized, just given all the tickets that were sold, the fact that Iran had scheduled other friendlies in the country as well. And we can talk about whether it was a good idea to have them scheduled in the first place. But that was my initial thought. So the fact that I saw it canceled, in my mind, I thought this has to maybe do with the visas, just because I was told as recently as yesterday that Iran's visas, with the government that is, were still in limbo. So if that was in fact the case, then I don't think they really had much of a choice but to cancel it. If they cancel because of political pressures, then I think that opens up a whole other can of worms in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen one specific tweet going around a lot. I want to get both you guys' opinion on it because, and I don't know, just it's a very interesting one. They said the assumption is that it's political. I think that's somewhat fair to say. We don't know. The visa thing could be true, and that could be a big reasoning behind it. But if it is a political thing and they had the rug pulled out from under them, what happens in 2026 if there's a World Cup in Canada and Iran and Canada get matched up against each other? What happens in that situation? You've opened up a big can of worms and a big picture type situation. So Adam, we'll go to you. What's your thoughts on that? And was your thoughts this morning when you woke up and saw this news?
We sort of talked about it off air before starting, but like FIFA is not going to really have much confidence in Canada or in the Canadian Soccer Federation that something like this won't happen going forward, and that won't happen as they're hosting the 2026 World Cup, which is obviously very concerning. Like, we don't know what 2026 holds, but if there is a political conflict or human rights issue, which will happen, by the way, these aren't going to stop anytime soon. In our lifetime, we're going to see many more of them, and I'm sure there'll be stuff happening in 2026 that's making global news. I'm sure FIFA doesn't feel overly confident that Canada won't, in the 11th hour, make some massive decision to boycott a match or to I don't even want to know in the 2026 World Cup, which is difficult to think and difficult to contemplate. Obviously, as we mentioned, I don't think Iran should have been the friendly target. I don't know all the background information in terms of how they came and landed on Iran. It doesn't make a lot of sense for Canada from the standpoint that we don't play an Asian team in our World Cup group. They're a high level club, ranked highly. So obviously from that standpoint, it's good to get a team outside of CONCACAF. But I think a lot of us were kind of scratching our head a little bit when this friendly was initially announced, saying like, we play two European teams. It would made a lot of sense to get a team from Europe, maybe even get a team from Africa, get an Egypt, get an Algeria, somebody that's going to maybe resemble a Morocco a little bit more. So there was that initially, but again, we were way past that, and I had accepted that Iran was who we were going to be playing, and while it wasn't, it didn't make a lot of sense from a footballing perspective, maybe for Canada. I was comfortable with the fact that it was going to give some sort of preparation for the World Cup.
Now, I mean,
And
I
now
think
they have nothing. You know?
yeah, and that's where I want to go next with Peter here. Now, if you look at the U.S. men's national team, they have 2 friendlies and then the 2 Nations League matches. If you go to Mexico, I believe they have 3 friendlies and then 2 Nations League. Canada, way back when, took a long time to schedule one. We only scheduled one, missing out on an opportunity to obviously prepare. It was a bit of an interesting one in Iran. Again, I think the matchup and quality would have been fine, but in terms of that political issue, now it's blown up in your face and you have one. So, Peter, do you think this is an issue that goes a little bit deeper in terms of just simple preparation? And why don't you think that there was a couple other friendlies or other plans that were made and had to go to the Iran in the first place?
I'll do my best to present both sides here because I know it's very, very, very difficult. There's a lot of layers here. But if we go back to when Canada qualified for the World Cup and it became official, and at this point, the focus shifted to what's our World Cup group going to be? Who are the friendly opponents in the lead up? And where are they going to be played? Nick Bontis, came onto our show, Northern Football, and did say that he was in contact with several federations, some of the marquee federations. The big problem with June was, with Europe also playing Nations League, they're out of the running immediately. So you're limited to the South American nations and some African nations as well. Brazil decided to go to Asia. Argentina has that weird Super Cup thing against Italy in Europe, so they were probably going to be out of it as well, although Canada was apparently in talks with Argentina. Apparently the holdup was just the amount of money they were asking for in order to play. Which, I mean, take that for what you will, because Iran was apparently going to get about $400,000. Given that the CSA is cash strapped, maybe they thought, this is maybe a bit too much money to pay to them, but there were still other options. Nigeria could have been one, which when you consider that the women's teams played against each other in Vancouver just a month and a half ago here, you imagine that there's a relationship between both federations that they could have worked something out. And Nigeria is a solid team. They're not going to the World Cup, but they got some world-class forwards that could have given Canada a real challenge. And then there was Ecuador, possibly. Now, they ended up rescheduling one of their canceled friendlies for Miami against Cape Verde. There were rumors that they were going to play Iran in Toronto. That didn't end up happening. Maybe it's because of the same reasons why this friendly got canceled. So that's that side of it. In terms of the government side of it, I find it very, very strange and peculiar. I mentioned this a couple of times on different platforms, that it's okay for other Iranian athletes to come into Canada since this tragic event in 2020 occurred, where Canadians obviously died, and that was awful, clearly inexcusable. But if Iranian wrestlers are allowed to enter the country, if Iranian musicians, big Iranian musicians, are allowed to enter the country since this event, why do you put your foot down for the soccer team? Is it because the Canadian men's national team is now on a different scale, on a different scope, and therefore, it doesn't look as good for the world's game, I guess, that, the biggest sport in the world between these two teams are being played. You don't have good diplomatic relations. And then therefore, like the whole thing is confusing, right? Because I feel like you're picking and choosing when you want to put your foot down. And really, where do you draw the line in that case? Should they have scheduled the friendly in the first place, knowing that this probably could have happened? No. And frankly, you're seeing the reasons why now, because now you're left scrambling possibly to reschedule this lost friendly. That plus the traveling schedule, I think, also led to this. But frankly, it's just a whole big mess that really no party is blameless in at this point, whether you're Canada Soccer, whether you're the Canadian government, or anyone in between.
And I agree, and I appreciate you guys coming on here and talking about this, because it can be a very touchy subject when politics get mixed in with sports. And I think the bit of a consensus is that this was always an option. This is something that could always happen. Maybe you should not done it in the first place. Now it's backfiring. Now I went back to your tweet, Peter, when I did a little video earlier today when you said ramifications, and you had a list of different things. And I'm going to throw it over to Adam first, because one of the interesting things on that list, to kind of veer away a little bit from the more serious things, is we had a young, talented dual national coming on for his first experience. Now, from what I understand, he was looking to probably play in the friendly match, which would not cap time. It keeps his option open, but he gets to get introduced to a player like Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David, this brotherhood, this core that went through qualifying, goes to World Cup. This could have been a real good opportunity to convince a player who has just got his La Liga debut that this is where you should, settle your national career. You have our rivals in the US also looking at him. And then to have this kind of come out the way he is, which probably means that he won't feature of this window, and we'll get Peter to maybe come in there as well after Adam speaks on it. But what is the look to a young player like this coming in this camp and just seeing this absolute mess? If you're a United States fan, are you sitting there being like, why don't we give it a try and see if we can do this a little bit better?
100%. I want to take 30 seconds to just touch on one thing before I get to Koleosho, which is I spent about an hour in a Twitter space full of Iran supporters before joining the YouTube link, and I realized a lot of what is going on is actually with Iranian Canadians not wanting to support Iran and what the government is doing. So I think it's a much bigger issue than it was made to be. And actually one tweet that I think summarized my opinion on this as well is maybe Canada Soccer needs to have a little bit more diversity in their front office to be able to recognize these issues before they become issues. Because my understanding was if somebody from Iran or somebody who's more familiar with the situation and the Iranian community in Canada, knowing what's going on, was a part of this committee, this friendly would have never happened, because the Iranian community in Canada is very, very against what the government is doing and not wanting to support anything that Iran is doing right now. So this would have been shot down from day one. This would have been prevented from day one. So that's just a note I wanted to throw out there before we totally transition, and I forgot about it. As for Koleosho, this is devastating. This is huge. I mean, we saw canceled camps involving Marcelo Flores being called with COVID. And then, not too long in the future after that, he makes his commitment to Mexico. I'm not saying that's because those camps were canceled, because most likely he would have done that anyways. But you lose your chance sometimes, and your chances are finite. And this might be an example of Canada missing a chance with Koleosho to get him actually some minutes playing alongside an Alphonso Davies or Jonathan David or Stefan Eustachio, or the list goes on and on and on. He's going to get the camp experience for 7 days. He's going to get to train with the team. That's not nothing. It's better to get him in camp than to not at all. But this could be a huge missed opportunity, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, Peter, and Canada's done everything right so far in World Cup qualifying. They've got a country behind this national team, and now it seems that they're fumbling at the places they really shouldn't. So, Peter, let's get your thoughts on that as well as on the Koleosho.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to follow up on Koleosho, every point that Adam made is completely factual. And even if you look back to the January camp, and I know it was a different reason why it was canceled, but Stefan Mitrovic was going to come into that camp and get his feet wet, get familiar with the setup. Given that you have a dual national who's being hotly pursued by Serbia's senior team, another World Cup bound opponent, plus Canada, and he was going to come into your camp first and get his feet wet, that could have been a major advantage. And really, it's a big reason why a lot of these dual nationals don't end up representing Canada, is just that the opportunities to play for Canada aren't there. Vast majority of dual nationals who can play for Canada do actually want to give it a shot at the very, very least. They just don't get the opportunity. So yet again with Koleosho, who very clearly, unlike Mitrovic in this window, was willing to come in, give it a shot, see what it was like, you lose that chance at least in game action, which can be pretty big. Now, in terms of, like the future and maybe if we look ahead bigger picture here, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit with this. I wonder what slip-ups like this does for John Herdman's status as coach after this World Cup. Because those England links come up, and you think to yourself logically, anyone who's followed this program for a long time and who's covered John Herdman as closely as all of us have, oh, he's not going to leave before 2026. He has bigger goals in mind. He wants to ride this out. Completely understandable. But if you continue to fumble with these things, if you can't get meaningful games scheduled against quality opponents time and time again, if you can't get more regular youth camps put together, maybe he ends up looking at those, even if it's just loose interest from England, and say, you know what, I'm going to explore this more and maybe see what happens. And yes, it can be tumultuous going into the English club game, But if that sort of speaks to the issues here, that if he maybe sees that as a more enticing option than something where he knows that, listen, he's probably never going to get fired for the rest of his time here, unless like something completely disastrous happens. So I look at that and think, I wonder if maybe that affects things going forward if this continues, because this is really the first major issue that Canada Soccer had control over where it's blown up in their face. And that's really the big important thing here outside of the dual nationals as well.
And something that I kind of want to highlight a little bit with John Herdman is no one really sees the behind the scenes work that this man puts into this program to get it from where it was to where it is now. A lot of that, is, as we know, comes to pursuing dual nationals. He's such a good speaker. He's such a charismatic manager. He paints a picture and he's able to convince these dual nationals to represent him. I can't think of the amount of work it took for him on each international, but when he met with Luka, he obviously had a game plan. He did something right to get this kid to the camp. He did everything right. He did his job. And then it was, like you mentioned, it was fumbled for no fault of his own. And now maybe all that work that he put in to get the kid to be like, you know what, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to do. And it could be gone just like that. It's a professional look that I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Luka is okay with it. We don't know, but you can't imagine it's going to leave a very good taste in your mouth. So it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. But another thing that you pointed out, Peter, and I don't know where you guys are going to maybe go with this, is because Adam was asking me a little bit off camera is terms of repercussions of a fine or sanctions, or what do you think moving on from a friendly like this can do? Because Iran's obviously livid. This isn't fair to the Iranians. They need to qualify, or they qualified the World Cup. They need to prep us just as much as we do. This got taken from them. They also have another match in Canada. I don't know if you've heard anything about that. I'm assuming there's probably some up in the air things around that, but what is it looking like in terms of a fine or maybe a potential punishment?
Well, so we've also touched about this so far. This is going to be big for the 2026 announcement in something like 21 days. I think it's actually 3 weeks today that the host cities get announced. Maybe FIFA looks at that and thinks, well, can we risk putting it in Vancouver after what happened here? Do we just give games to Toronto where they've kind of had, pretty consistent scheduling consistency, right? Or do we risk it and put it in Vancouver, given that political things got involved? And FIFA doesn't like that, understandable, which is kind of ironic because, we don't have to get into that, but they don't like it when politics get involved with these things. So if you see that this is going to be an issue, they might play it safe and go, we're just going to give it to maybe one more U.S. city just to sort of balance out the risk factor here. But it could also, in terms of the financial repercussions, guys, $400,000 was going to go to Iran. The rest of the money that was going to be drawn in from this game, which would have been somewhere in the $3.78 million range, somewhere around there, was going to go to Canada Soccer. And given that their annual budget is about $4 million, which I don't think so coincidentally, as we talk about these things, comes from the Canadian government, that would have been massive, as have all these qualifying games that have gotten big crowds, has done for their coffers. The FIFA windfalls haven't come through yet, which is huge. This would have really helped them financially. And now if you risk getting fined by FIFA, by the FA of Iran, then that just adds to the hit. And it kind of also makes you wonder, well, maybe it actually would have been cheaper if we had just scheduled a friendly with Argentina, and therefore we wouldn't have to deal with any of this. We'd just be losing money. But hey, we build up some goodwill. We can at least just maybe push this loss forward after we get the FIFA windfalls and then go from there. But, I guess the overall lesson is, and, they never always seem to, but that the CSA learns some lessons from this and make sure it doesn't happen again, because after building up so much goodwill in the country, they have now given us a reminder of, oh, right, this is still Canada Soccer after all.
Yeah, and Adam, if you're another country now, whether it's the political side or not, but if you watch this just from an outside, whether you are Argentina or anyone else, do you want to just jump right in bed with Canada after that, after this big fumble? Does this maybe make it even more difficult for Canada to maybe find friendlies going forward? Because we still have some openings. Maybe this window, obviously the following. Do you think that puts a bit of a red flag in there?
I think it makes it more difficult to host friendlies. I still think there's going to be a lot of interest to play against Canada just because of the challenges they could pose a team. and in preparation for a World Cup, especially, I don't think they're going to have any issues getting friendlies in September. But maybe hosting them, and especially if you're a country that has a little bit of a dicey political situation going on, you know, I wouldn't even pick the phone up if Canada was calling me right now. And I recognize that when I say this, like the cognitive dissonance that we all need, being soccer fans, knowing what sort of FIFA stands for, it's hard to like balance and juggle like what your opinion is sort of outside of football with like the importance of actually playing these matches. So I recognize that, and I don't want that to be entirely lost in this whole conversation. But if I'm a country that's probably outside of Europe or South America, yeah, I don't even know if it would be worth the risk of picking the phone up when Canada calls, because I just feel like there's potential for something like this to happen for sure.
And yeah, I mean, and again, most of us, because we're Canadians, are looking at it from the Canadian perspective. But I mean, if I was an Iranian supporter, I'd be very frustrated as well. Like, I'm frustrated as a Canadian knowing that there's no friendlies as of right now. We are missing massive opportunities, and I keep dropping this stat because it's a true stat, and there's no getting around it. We haven't played outside of CONCACAF since January 2020 Iceland friendly. Completely different team. It's not even relevant. I don't know if I can count it, but it's been so long since we get to see how Canada would match up against other oppositions, and we're just missing the ball and not scheduling. But I think that one of the more exciting things we're going to have in this, because it's been a bit of a frustrating chat so far, but what about a potential friendly? Let's say some miracle Canada's able to juggle things around. What are the friendlies looking like? Peter, who do you have potentially in mind? And Adam, let's see if you can come up with something that maybe Peter doesn't mention.
Well, we saw that the who was it? The ambassador to Canada from Ukraine tweeted out saying like, "Oh, you know, we'd be ready to play against Canada. You can take the $400,000 you were going to pay Iran, dedicate it to the fundraising efforts for the war in Ukraine." They do have that playoff against Scotland on June 1st. I don't believe they're playing Nations League games off the top of my head. So if that's the case, they are. Okay,
yeah,
well then that might make it
the 8th. So it would be a tight turnaround.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, traveling all that way to Vancouver, then back again, having to adjust to like an 8-9 hour time difference, that would be quite difficult. But like, I guess that could be a long shot. Otherwise, like, I don't know. I know Iran had Albania. If maybe possibly Iran can't play the rest of their games in Canada, which I can't see how they would after this, that could be a possibility. As I mentioned, Ecuador looked like that was going to be a match that was happening in Toronto, but then Ecuador ended up scheduling another game against Cape Verde in Miami instead. So then that didn't end up happening. That would have been the perfect opponent, I feel, Ecuador. But other than that, I'm honestly lost in terms of which friendly opponents it could be, which is detrimental because, again, you're not going to be able to get these opportunities for another 3 months. And then by that point, you're only a couple months out of the World Cup. It's a very tight window at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that it kind of my first gut feeling was, well, one of those teams between Scotland and Ukraine has to lose. So whoever loses, it makes sense that when they were to play the second leg, that you would play your game. And I guess it's always a possibility, but then the travel doesn't really make sense when you factor in that they each play 3 Nation League matches. Talk about a crazy schedule. Eh? That's a 5-match window for whoever wins that first match, I should say. Yeah. So it's possible, I guess. Would probably involve Canada having to travel to Europe though, because I can't imagine either of those teams, if they're going to be playing their next 3 games after that match in Europe, want to come to North America to play 3 days before their Nations League match. I don't see that happening. So if Canada were to travel to, I mean, Ukraine's not really tenable right now either. So if they were to travel to Scotland, should Scotland lose, or if they were to travel to a neighboring European country, maybe. But that feels like this is super, super last minute. We're talking about like you don't even know who's available to play until after they play on the 1st. So you wouldn't really even be able to plan it. That's not going to happen. We know Ecuador won't happen. So I think I've just come to the realization that Canada's not going to have a friendly unless they're looking at a nation that is far outside of the World Cup picture, which I guess is always possible because there are nations that I'm sure weren't all that interested in. They probably have Nations League. They had no interest in World Cup preparation matches because they're 70th ranked in the world or whatever. And I'm sure you'll find a country like that if you really, really wanted to, but I'm not sure what the appeal would be outside of that.
Yeah, and I mean, the theories were going around this morning. Everyone's brain was working. They were just throwing ideas to the board, and then people were fact checking it, and it made it very difficult to try to find a couple options. So I haven't really dug deep. So if anyone in the chat wants to throw out any ideas of countries that could work or fact check what I'm about to say, but we had someone tweet us and said that there's only the CONMEBOL only has 2 match windows, and it looks like Bolivia doesn't have any, and Colombia might have 1, but there's a list of nations there: Venezuela, Bolivia, Paraguay, Chile, and Colombia. Now, if he set up a Chile friendly or potentially even a Colombia friendly, depending on the availability, it could be interesting. Now, like kind of similar to Iran, where it's not a European nation, it's not an African nation, but guess what? It's a nation. It's a good nation. I would take a Colombia matchup just about any day of the week, but I don't know how they're going to swing something like that. I don't know what the availability is looking like, and they got a very short turnaround to try to pull something off here. But the interesting thing is that they have a bunch of days to do it because they didn't have friendlies booked really in the first place. So I don't know. Let's see
I
if we
saw
can do it.
Marco Bustos tweet, can PL all-star team. I thought that was a kind of cool, interesting concept. But
Yeah,
I mean,
we had a
look at that. Wait, we got a question here. The chances that Canadian MLS teams end up in the CPL instead of MLS. I'm not going to steal your thunder, but very, 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 very low. I love the CPL, but I can't see it happen.
I actually misread that question. I thought when I read it the first time, I thought it was going down the Bustos area of creating a CPL. But anyways, but yes, continue, Adam.
Yeah, no, I mean, like at this point, they got to play somebody, right? They might just do an inter squad match, which would be super disappointing. But it would be great if they could play somebody. So beggars can't be choosers. Like they're really late in this process. I also maybe you guys could enlighten me, but do some of these South American countries did they even have a camp? Because they weren't playing any matches. So are they in for camp? Is a Colombia even like a legitimate option? Or because you can't just gather. Chile will be in Japan for a tournament with Tunisia, Japan, and Ghana. Okay, so that answers for Chile. I don't know about like a Colombia. I'm sure they're having some sort of gathering.
I think Colombia is playing Saudi Arabia in Europe, but I just think they have the one game. And I actually think it's on the same day this Iran game is actually going to happen. I could be wrong though. They might be dicey, but I think they only have 1, maybe 2 games. Like I'm sure you could potentially work something out there. It would have to be like a Bolivia, a Venezuela, who wouldn't be as appealing, I feel, to get them to come over, which is the downside when you leave it to the last minute, right? I mean, it's the same thing for anything in life. When you leave something to the last minute, it's not going to be the most optimal I guess the most optimal work in the end, right? Whereas had you done your due diligence before, maybe you could have gotten Colombia to come to Vancouver. Who knows, right? Just before they got the Saudi Arabia game.
Yeah, I mean, it's simply just frustrating. From what I looked though there, I mean, because United States, I believe, are playing on like on May 1st or something. So I mean, if you really push, maybe, but it seems so unlikely you get Colombia on like June 1st or May 30th or something like along those lines. But I mean,
now at this point, what is it? Was it 26th?
Yeah, it's May 26th.
Like, literally less than a week.
You're gonna show up they're gonna just show up at the field and see whoever's there. What up, Maxwell?
That dude. I don't know. But I mean, again, like you said it best. Beggars can't be choosers. We need preparation, and I think like Bolivia is a tough team. They had a really impressive little campaign there. I know they obviously didn't qualify, but they're a tough team. I mean, going down to the altitude in Bolivia, I mean, if you gotta put up the money, at least it gets you something. But I just think if we end up not being able to put a friendly there, I just think it's a catastrophic fumble that we have 2 more Nations League games. We have to wait before we get that opportunity to play a nation outside of CONCACAF. It's just a real sour taste in everybody's mouth. I mean, I don't really know exactly where to go here, but I mean,
we were going to make this a Twitter Spaces because it was going to be so informal, and then I feel like once we got on YouTube, it's like more formal. But guys, we have no idea where we're going with this. Like, there's no plan here at all.
Much like with Canada Soccer, actually.
We have the same preparation routine. No, it's it's frustrating. It's frustrating because you kind of expect, you saw over the course of this past year, Canada Soccer, and to Nick Bontis' credit, since Bontis has come in, there's been a more professional approach, a more, his main thing is trying to drive revenue. He's not going to be happy about how this all played out because you're going to take a huge hit, as Peter mentioned. But things have been done in a more professional way, and and you just don't expect this to happen. You know, the trajectory and the direction of the program, in my opinion, it was heading in the right direction, and then this is just an all-time fumble job, and I don't know how else to say it other than like it's super disappointing. They should have known better. They should have prepared further. Like someone's going to wear it at the end of the day, because stuff like this can't happen. And at the end of the day, hopefully it's just a fine and not FIFA sanctions, because that's when it could get really, really detrimental for Canada. I don't think it will be, but FIFA does what FIFA wants. So I wouldn't be entirely shocked either way.
Yeah. Maybe Big Vic can sort of do a bit of a favor, be like, let's just hold off a little bit, slide, please. Yeah. You know, like it's different circumstances. You know, who knows? That's the benefit of having a Canadian in such a high positioning in FIFA. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's gonna be interesting. Now, there's a lot of theories going around as well as how Canada was going to treat these matches, and from my understanding, it kind of looked like they were going to look at that Iranian match and put a very strong squad together, maybe rest it a little bit against Curacao, and then finish strong with Honduras. So I guess, get your guys' opinion. What would you look to do now? Are you just going full A squad? Because I thought the timing of the tweet from Jonathan David was very interesting, talking about the amount of minutes, which told me, okay, Ike Ugbo, we're going to see this man start a little bit over this game. So I don't know, Peter, what do you think? Do you think a full A squad for both matches if we can't find another friendly, or how are they going to try to balance this out?
Yet another victim of this whole thing, Ike Ugbo. If he doesn't end up starting a match, my God. But I mean, I think just if you can't get another friendly, you're going to have to schedule, or you're going to have the A team play at the very least the majority of the two games. Like, I'm not talking maybe full 180, but certainly 150, somewhere around there, because again, you've been off for so long, and yes, these guys have good chemistry together, but it's more so just picking up little intricacies back on the pitch again, right? Like realizing, oh, right, you know, Richie likes to go this way and receive the ball here. Like, you know, and then you kind of get that out of your system, which is why 3 games was quite helpful in that regard. Having only 2, especially with travel in between, less than ideal, not to mention 2 different playing surfaces. At least Canada would have had to get to play on the same sort of playing surface in back-to-back matches. So I imagine they roll with an A squad for the most part, but maybe with a little bit of rotation against Honduras, just to make sure guys like Steven Vittoria's knees don't get completely destroyed.
And I have a thought on this too. Like, so we were all sort of the single friendly was justified to us because it was, we have 2 Nations League matches, you know, playing more than 3 matches in a window might be a lot, yada, yada, yada. And I kind of understood it and I bought it. But I'm thinking now, Mexico has what? I think you said 5, Josh. The US has 4. Like, not in terms of between Nations League and friendlies together, right? I think Mexico 5, the US 4. You're telling me Canada could not have had a 4th match in this window? And instead of calling 26 players, maybe they call 29 or 30 and they get a few other guys a look. Like, this really, it just feels like it was dropped the ball was dropped in every which way. And at least if you would have lost your friendly with Iran, but you had a second one, let's say in Ecuador or somebody. I keep saying some of these European teams, but I recognize that it's difficult with a lot of their Nations League schedules. But if you had literally any country from Africa or any country from South America or any country from Asia that qualified for the World Cup, everyone would have been satisfied with it. You know, get 2 of those countries. And then if this one, you know, falls through at the 11th hour, at least you still have that one friendly that you can cling to. But they started doing the bare minimum from the beginning, trying to only get the 3 matches in the window, right? Keeping the squad tighter, which I guess I kind of understood. I mean, at this point, I can be convinced of anything being a good idea. But at the end of the day, this blew up in their face though, right? Like, I was all for it. I'm like, yeah, no, it makes sense. Let's keep the squads, you know, tight, keep the camaraderie for the World Cup, and one friendly should be enough. We don't want to overwork them. But now, you know, we've seen how that's played out, and it's just frustrating because it didn't need to be. And most countries not only in our region, I think Jamaica has 2 friendlies, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it was, they play Uruguay and somebody else.
I think Uruguay got canceled actually.
Oh, okay.
Or not canceled, but like they're only sending a U23 squad or something for that Uruguay game because the travel would have just been insane, which it would have been. Like Montevideo back to the CONCACAF region. My God, that would have been crazy.
But I would have rather, you know, I would have even rather than done that and then, you know, come with a plan of maybe like a split squad type thing. Like, if you're going to play, you know, 2 matches, just try to schedule stuff to get guys opportunities. I would have loved to see an expanded squad and have guys like Waterman make the squad. I would have loved to see some of the guys who have been on the outside looking in. Also, this is while I'm venting, I'm just gonna keep going. Mitrovic, like, I don't.
Yeah,
What's going on here?
Open up a can of worms there.
What's going on here? Like, I don't get it. I don't understand.
That's the best way to describe it. What on earth is going on here? Like, it's like that Jim Halpert meme. What is going on? Like,
at the beginning,
no one really knows
because he was he was young and he was just making his way. He has, like, was it 10 goals, 3 assists or something? He's 19 years old. He's doing it. Mm-hmm. He's consistent for the first team. There's serious European interest. What the hell are we waiting for? What is happening? I don't buy what's being sold. I don't buy that he's as far on the depth chart as we're making it seem. I feel like, again, this is one of those things where we're trying to justify to ourselves after the fact, like, oh, he's not called. Well, realistically, is he better than Jayden Nelson? It's like, well, I don't even care if he's better than Jayden Nelson, because even if he's not, get him into camp, right? Like, the same way we have Koleosho, in camp. It doesn't make sense to me. Anyways, I digress.
Well, okay, so I might as well divulge this now, because I know Gareth Wheeler did it last night at halftime at the Canadian Championship matches. There's really not a lot of difference in the reporting from that side. The only thing I will say is I think the real rub here was that it's simply down to Mitrovic wasn't interested in coming into this camp. That seems to be the consensus from both sides. He just wasn't ready to come into the June camp. Now, everything else after that is almost like, this kind of also played a part, but really we could have made it work if the main thing happened. Because let's be honest, you can make the argument of, Mitrovic maybe would have struggled for playing time given all the wingers that you have. Luka Koleosho's a winger. So... and
he's played like 7 minutes professionally. Like, again, and I agree with the call. It's a great call. You get him in your camp, you get him to feel it out. We would have done the same with Flores. Let's not kid ourselves.
Exactly.
But so I just don't understand where, like, the Mitrovic situation. And I saw some stuff about, he wasn't ready to commit. Well, he didn't even need to commit. Get him in, play the run. I mean, obviously that's not a thing anymore, but that would have been the idea, right? The same as Koleosho. Koleosho's not being capside in this camp, right? And so.
But that's sorry. So that's sort of what I meant. Like, he just didn't want to come into the camp now. Rather, he kind of just wanted to wait, I guess, because, I mean, as you said, I think Koleosho, because he represented the U.S. at U15 level, which I still think counts, if he were to play competitively, he would have to file a one-time switch to play in the Nations League, I believe. Certainly Mitrovic would have to do that to play in the Nations League.
Yes.
But not in a friendly. And I mean, people would say, well, yeah, that's the case. Then why was he willing to come in January and play against Guatemala when that was scheduled, right? It's just a simple case of he did not want to come at this time. Everything else is sort of secondary. And even the discussion from the Canada soccer side of, we have all these wingers in our disposal. They even mentioned some of the strikers, which makes me think if he were to play for Canada, he'd be part of a duo or out wide, which he can play in either role. But that for me is also, like, just editorializing. There's absolutely no chance 100%. He'd be that far down the depth chart. I'm sorry.
No, there isn't. And even if he was, you get him into camp, right? He's doing that. He's playing in a top league, like he's playing in a professional setting in a first division. You get him into camp, you see what you have. There's no justification for that otherwise, unless the player didn't want to. Now, what I heard from the player's brother was that he didn't receive any call from Canada. He was on the list or whatever, never received the final call.
The extended list,
The extended list, right? And never received the official call to the senior team.
Right.
So I don't know. I struggle. I don't know what to believe. We have the father, the brother, very active on Twitter, both of them, very candid. And then we have, obviously the information that we're being given, which is very different. It's very, very conflicting information. Maybe this just adds to the frustration of just not like, it's hard to be a football fan in this country because you feel like I'm a huge Raptors fan, right? I'm a huge Raptors fan. I'm a huge Blue Jays fan. I'm a huge, Leafs fan. I'm a huge 49. Like, it's so easy to know what's happening with any of those teams, right? In terms of, I'm not even talking coverage. I'm just talking like this information is just readily available and it's out there. I don't know when I'm being lied to, when I'm being deceived. Like, I don't know what's going on. And I just want answers. That's all anybody wants is just answers, and it would have helped. It would have helped in the lead up to this Iran friendly. And I think had there been more of an open dialogue and had there been more, if you think about it this way, like prior to Iran being scheduled, if there were some murmurs or rumors about Iran being scheduled, that pushback that happened this week and last week would have happened a month ago. The game would have never happened. It would have been a different friendly with a different opponent. So I just feel like maybe, including your supporters and trying to like deliver them the information that they're so desperate for. And I know Canada Soccer put the survey out a while ago, like what can we do better? Well, for starters, a lot, but that would be one of the things, right? Like, can we be more candid? Can we be more open? Can we bring our fans in and give them some of the information that they're so desperate for? I message you guys, like, you guys are as insider as it pretty much comes at this point. And even you guys are like, I don't know. Like it's tricky, right?
Everybody is. Everybody is.
Right? So it's and everyone I talk to is kind of the same answer. And just that part needs to be cleaned up, right? It needs to be more professional. And so that's where I stand on it. I'm kind of going on a tangent, so I apologize. But
no, that's fine. You're allowed to go on tangents. To add to this, because I do listen, covering this team sometimes is a headache because sometimes arrangements are made last minute about training. I'm like, oh yeah, this player that we had initially scheduled to speak to you, it's no longer going to be him. It's going to be him. Like things like that, it messes with you at times. We put up with it because we cover the team every day. So therefore we're going to be fine with it. But would like a national news outlet be cool with that? Probably not.
Never. No.
And I get that the CSA relative to other federations is understaffed. I get that they're strapped for cash. There would, trust me, there would be volunteers who are probably watching this right now.
Tell me what I need to do.
Any one of us, just be like, hey, listen, we need help scheduling 2 friendlies. Do you think you could put some? Yes, 100%. I will help you. Like, you would think they could get people in who could figure it out. And that's kind of why I wonder, are the right people in these departments actually, are they fit for these roles, essentially? It seems to be changing slowly with these new hires that are happening. You can kind of see that some have some soccer experience, which is crucial, which sounds so obvious, but you'd be surprised. Just look at the Vancouver Whitecaps, for example, up until a couple of years ago, had a lot of people who had no soccer experience up top. But that is really what it comes down to. Just be transparent with the fans. There's a reason why, and I feel like the CSA kind of likes this at times. There's a reason why the fans will tweet at us asking all these questions, and rightfully so. They just want to know the answers, much like Adam just ranted about. Just like I'm tired of trying to just kind of make a puzzle out of this and trying to fit the pieces together to come up with some sort of conclusion that may or may not be true. Mm-hmm. And that's really all it comes down to, is just be forward, be transparent, be honest with the fans, especially the ones who've put up with so much BS over the last X amount of years.
Now, you guys, I had points for each. You guys were just rolling there, so I'm not sure exactly how to jump in, but I mean, yeah.
Oh, Josh, you're still there.
Yeah, I forgot. No, I'll try to do it very quickly just to kind of, tie it together. I mean, the Mitrovic situation, I mean, only he will know. I think being a dual national is a very complex thing.
It is.
Yes. We've heard different reports. I think he's still very young. And the one thing about John Herdman with his tight groups is you're not going to see that 28 plus. He likes the players that he wants to grow. And these friendlies leading up to a World Cup are very, very important. So, I mean, if it wasn't a World Cup year, yes, test out these bodies. But the fact that it's coming up, it's almost like every single game matters for your core 17 and then the extra bodies. So maybe Mitrovic didn't feel like he wanted to do it yet because he knew he'd be on the outside looking in, that 25th man. I don't know, but we don't know. And in terms of, yes, the transparency, it comes down to, I think, a big part of it is just a growing soccer nation. It's almost a good and bad thing at the same time because since the hype of this Canadian men's national team has happened, it's getting a lot more fans, letting a lot more engagement, which is starting to see the pushback being like, we want transparency. We want to know what's happening instead of kind of sitting in the dark. But where before, maybe they didn't get that kind of push because, I mean, let's face it. I don't know, in my time of being on this earth, I haven't seen any type of soccer fans as dedicated and as interested as we have now. This has been a complete movement. It's been on the cards for a while, and seeing these engaged fans that want answers, it's pretty cool to see. But now it's time, like you said, on the behind the scenes things to start putting these motions into action. So we're not sitting here, we're not wondering, and we're getting the type of answers. But you guys went on a very interesting one there. So we're gonna maybe go
all day long. Hey, I'm here. I'm working in the background. I'm multitasking.
No, and I think there is an important part, and I saw it in the chat, and it was a question we kind of touched on a little bit. But I mean, we had a nice one. It's like, you guys are off topic. I was like, yeah, we are. We were cycling. But the one thing that I think is a very important takeaway, and I think we should discuss it a little bit before you wrap this up, is is the fact that Canada is hosting a World Cup in 2026, and we just absolutely put down a statement. And Aaron goes in and he asks us a question. Well, what's going to be the problem in a World Cup if Iran, North Korea, Israel, Russia? What if one of these countries plays against Canada in Canada? What happens? What happens then? Do you suck it up? You can't forfeit.
That's the
you can't.
question.
You can't
No.
cancel.
It's probably going to happen. You know, like there's
Yeah.
that's the way these things work. They're gonna get a Russia, or they're gonna get an Israel. I mean, Israel is maybe more of a long shot, but 2018 World Cup, you never know. They wouldn't be able to tell you how they'll respond to it because they weren't prepared to respond to this one. You know, and it's like it was just thrown their way and no one could possibly see it coming. And I don't know, I don't claim to be a political expert, and I'm not a political expert, but even I had an understanding of the tension between Iran and Canada prior to this, you know, and I knew, you know, I knew about the plane being shot down that contained many Canadian passengers. So this wasn't like, this wasn't news. This is recent. We're talking about like less than 2 years ago this happened, which in COVID years is like, that feels like 3 months ago. So really, this is recent. This should have been on people's radar. And again, maybe this comes down to like you need to diversify your front office if you're Canada Soccer, to try to get these perspectives and these opinions, but also to be able to maybe de-escalate some of these situations, like and to draw a line in the sand between sport and you know, this political tensions and human rights issues, which is so hard to say. But at the same time, we're going to a World Cup in Qatar, where the stadiums are essentially built with the skulls of migrant workers from Sri Lanka. So, I mean, we can talk the talk, but we're never going to be able to walk the walk, not in this sport, not under FIFA. It's just not how it works. And we have to make a decision at some point. Is like, do we want to do the best we can do? We're going to send our players. If they want to make a statement before the match, they can do that. But we can't control what happens in every country in the world at the same time. That's not what the objective is here. We have a national team that plays soccer. They need to play soccer against other countries in order to be a national team. You know, we can't control what every country does. You know, we just can't do that. So
No.
In the simple answer is it needs to change, right? Because this can't be the precedent going forward. As much as it pains me that we even had to schedule Iran for a friendly, and a friendly is a little different than a World Cup match where you don't have control of your opponent.
Of course.
We do need to get past this and be able to recognize, like, this is part of the sport, and either we're going to leave FIFA and we're not going to be one of the member associations, or this is just what we have to put up with.
Yeah. And that's it for me, is that before this was canceled, when it looked like maybe they could ride through this and play this game with likely, you know, criticism coming afterwards, most of which would be justified. You know, the thought was, if this was due to political pressure, and the CSA was pressured heavily by multiple government officials, from the mayor of Vancouver to different MPs in Parliament and everybody in between, if they bow to that political pressure, in my experience, when you give somebody an inch, they take a mile. So if you allow it to happen now, what's going to happen when a situation like this pops up in the future, knowing that the Canadian government looks at this and thinks, oh, here's another chance for us to put our foot down on something, when we could have put our feet down on multiple things that are probably more conducive to Canada's actual issues. I won't get into the political side of it before I kind of launch into this. And, you know, like, how can we sort of push them a little bit, or maybe not push them, but how, like, is it possible that we could do this again? And is it possible? And from FIFA's side as well, if they did it once, are they going to do it again? Canada Soccer, that is. And they're fair questions. They're fair questions from all sides. And this is why this is a defining moment right now. Is this just a one-off, or is it a sign of things to come?
And again, guys, I really appreciate you guys coming on here, speaking your mind. We're going to end on an interesting note. I'm going to call it a big brain note, because we had a comment in the chat. And I just want to get you guys thinking, because I don't know how many people in the chat know this, or even if you guys are super familiar with it. But apparently, a couple days ago, May 25th, so yesterday, Jamaica took on Catalonia in a friendly. Now, Catalonia, I know that they have specific friendlies that go around.
Right.
Just for example, their last one hasn't been since 2019, I believe. Yeah, 2019. But players like Mingueza, Ricky Pugh, Cucurella, Gerard de la Flayo, like it's a decent little team there. There's also Basque County, which, as if you guys are familiar with Atletico Bilbao,
Yep.
I mean, Mooney Ayin, Inaki Williams, like pretty solid little team there. What an outside shot that would be, considering that this Catalonia team specifically, not really the Basque one, this Catalonia team just played a game a few days ago. They have their squad together. It doesn't look, I could be wrong, someone correct me, it doesn't look like there's another friendly that's out there. But what about putting something like that together, getting a relatively competitive side like Catalonia? Is that just
would be
too
cool.
big brain, or
It
is that?
would be
all
cool,
for it.
but
Yeah.
I don't know how feasible it could be at this
I don't
point.
know
But
either.
I would love to see it myself.
I'm like I said, beggars can't be choosers at this point. You take a friendly if you get one, and especially if you have a friendly where there's some notable players on the other end, because that's what you were going to get with Iran with Azmoun and Taremi, and they had some guys you have to worry about. Like, you don't want to play a team that you're going to walk over. I mean, there's no point. You might as well just not risk the injuries and whatever might come with that. You want something that's going to give you some semblance of preparation for the World Cup, or somebody that offers something different than what your CONCACAF nations would offer. So if they can't arrange that, then I would almost just rather them not even bother and just go with the 2 matches. Make sure, at least if you're going to play your 2 matches now and they're both Nations League games, you better frickin' win them both. Like, there's no, at this point, go beat them. No, it would look bad if Catalonia beats Canada. They aren't even a national team. I agree with that, but at the same time, it's like
It's not. There's not a bad looking team.
Yeah, you got to. I agree with you though. Like, I mean, it's kind of a no-win situation, but Canada's already in a no-win situation, So
Yeah.
That's where I stand on that. I sent Herdman a DM. I told him that my men's league team's available on the dates
good.
that they were
Okay.
supposed to play Iran. So
Perfect.
that's always an option. North Maple Regional Park for anybody who's out involved.
Oh, I think we lost him. All right. Well, you heard him.
Soccer fact.
Oh, he's back. There he is.
Oh, he's back. He's back. All right.
Sorry. On my end, I was still here. I was saying 15 minutes before kickoff, tickets are going to become available, and it's first come, first serve. So
There you go.
I'll let you guys know.
There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we kept these gentlemen here for an hour. We don't have a bunch of information. We don't know what's going to happen. Maybe Canada will find an opposition. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll get Catalonia. I'm telling you, man, that's big brain thinking right there. But
Wouldn't hate it.
I mean, in all honesty, I don't know. It's gonna struggle to see if they can get a friendly. We're gonna have to be here covering it along the way, and hopefully they can find it out, because this has definitely been a bit of a fumble. But any last words, guys, before we head out? Peter?
Canada soccer, man. What a roller coaster. That's all I can say.
There you go. All right, Adam.
Thanks for having me on, and this was more necessary for me than I think for your channel or anything like that. So I needed to get a lot of stuff off my chest.
All right, I appreciate you boys coming on. It means a lot. It is like I said, it's a touchy subject always, because it's a political thing, and we want answers. We don't have it yet. We'll have to wait and see what happens, guys. But if you could be so kind on the way out to drop a like, potentially a sub, and check these guys out on Twitter as well. Their links are in the description, as well as the Northern Football Podcast. That would be great. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers, friends.